I never thought I'd see my little girl treated like that, like she was nothing. The image still haunts me. My daughter, Emma, standing in the grand kitchen of my mansion, holding a plate of cold leftovers, while my stepmother, Veronica, stood tall with that familiar, cruel smirk. "Say thank you," Veronica demanded, her voice sharp enough to slice through the air. Emma, with her big brown eyes glistening, whispered, "Thank you," her small voice trembling. I watched from the doorway, unseen, frozen by disbelief. This was my house, my family, my child, and yet somehow she was being forced to thank someone for scraps. I could barely process it. My name is Alexander Grant. Most people know me as a billionaire businessman, but before that, I was just a man who had lost everything. My wife, my peace, and almost my soul. After my first wife passed away, I was broken. Veronica came into my life when I was at my weakest. She was kind, understanding, and patient, or at least, that's what I thought. She helped me raise Emma, or so I believed. I remarried her, thinking I was giving my daughter a mother figure. But behind closed doors, things were different. Emma had been quieter lately, more withdrawn. I assumed it was just school stress. Or maybe she missed her mother more than she could express. But that day, when I saw her clutching that plate, apologizing for being ungrateful, something inside me cracked open. I stayed hidden, listening as Veronica lectured her about respect and knowing her place. My fists clenched as I realized she wasn't just strict, she was cruel. The woman I trusted had turned my home into a place of humiliation for my child. As I stood there, watching Emma's tears fall silently, a cold fury began to burn inside me. I had built empires, faced ruthless competitors, and conquered markets, but nothing compared to the storm that was rising in me now. Veronica didn't know I was watching. She didn't know that moment would change everything. Because what she did next pushed me past my limit, and that was the moment I decided I would not stay silent anymore. I stayed there, hidden behind the doorway, my heart pounding with every cruel word that spilled from Veronica's lips. "You should be grateful I even let you eat this," she hissed, pushing the plate closer to Emma. "Do you think your father's money makes you special? You're just a spoiled little girl who needs to learn some humility." Emma's small hands trembled as she nodded quickly, whispering, "I'm sorry, ma'am." Ma'am. She called her ma'am. My daughter, who once ran through this house laughing, now spoke like a servant in her own home. I wanted to step in, to shout, to tear that fake smile off Veronica's face, but something in me told me to wait. I needed to see just how deep this cruelty went. I needed the truth, not just anger. As Veronica turned away, muttering about ungrateful brats, Emma set the plate down and hurried to her room. I quietly followed her, each step feeling heavier than the last. I found her sitting on the floor beside her bed, hugging her old teddy bear own her mother had given her before she passed. She didn't see me at first, and when she did, her eyes widened in panic. "Dad, I was just—" she stammered, trying to hide her tears. I knelt beside her and took her hands gently. "Emma," I said softly, "you don't have to lie to me. Tell me what's been going on." She looked at me for a long moment before her lips quivered. "I didn't want to make you sad, Daddy," she whispered. "But she doesn't like me. She says I'm lazy, that I don't deserve to eat what you earn. Sometimes she makes me clean up the kitchen after dinner and tells me to thank her for the leftovers." My chest tightened as every word stabbed deeper. I'd been blind, too lost in work, too distracted by my own guilt and grief to notice my daughter's silent suffering. I pulled her close, holding her as tears ran down her cheeks onto my shoulder. "You'll never go through that again," I whispered, my voice trembling with rage and regret. In that moment, I knew something had to change. I was done being blind, and Veronica was about to face the truth. That night I couldn't sleep. The image of Emma's trembling hands and Veronica's cold expression replayed in my mind like a broken film reel. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw my daughter's face, her forced smile, her whispered thank you, and the pain she tried so hard to hide from me. I had been too busy building an empire to see that my home was crumbling from within. I stared at the ceiling, my mind racing through memories the way Veronica had slowly taken control of everything, the household, the staff, even my schedule. She had insisted on handling Emma's upbringing, saying I was too soft on her. At first I believed her. I thought she was helping, but now I saw the manipulation, the calculated control. Around midnight, I got out of bed and went to my study. I opened the security system on my tablet and pulled up the camera footage from the kitchen. My stomach tightened as I watched what had happened earlier, Veronica towering over Emma, her tone dripping with disdain. Then I scrolled back through the past week, then the past month. What I saw made my hands shake. Repeated moments of humiliation. Veronica scolding Emma for taking food without permission, for speaking too loudly, for smiling at the maids. Sometimes she even made Emma eat alone. Every clip was another dagger of guilt. My jaw tightened as I realized this wasn't just cruelty, it was control. She was breaking my daughter down, piece by piece, right under my nose. I needed proof before confronting her, so I saved the footage. But then something caught my eye, Veronica talking on the phone in the living room. I turned the volume up. Her voice was cold. "He's still blind, and soon everything will be in my name," she said. "Once Emma goes to boarding school, I'll have full control of the accounts." My heart dropped. This wasn't just about hate. It was about money, power, betrayal. She had played me from the start. My grief had made me her perfect victim. I sat there in silence, staring at the screen, as the truth settled in. I wasn't just fighting for my daughter anymore. I was fighting for everything I had left, and Veronica had no idea the storm that was coming her way. The next morning, I acted as if nothing had happened. Veronica greeted me with her usual smile, that practiced sweetness that now felt like poison. "Good morning, darling," she said, placing a cup of coffee in front of me. Her eyes sparkled with that fake warmth I once mistook for love. "You're up early." I smiled faintly, forcing my voice to sound calm. "Busy day ahead," I said, pretending to glance at my phone. Inside, my thoughts were burning. I wanted to confront her right there, to throw the truth in her face. But anger without strategy is weakness. I needed to make her think everything was normal. As she turned to prepare breakfast, I studied her every move. She was confident, careless even, humming to herself while ordering the maid around. She had no clue that her little empire of manipulation was about to collapse. When Emma came down for breakfast, she looked nervous, scanning the room before taking her seat. "Good morning, sweetheart," I said softly. She managed a faint smile. Veronica's tone shifted instantly. "Emma, remember to say thank you before you eat," she said coldly, setting a small plate in front of her that had less food than anyone else's. That was it. My jaw clenched, but I stayed silent, wanting to see how far she'd go. Emma whispered, "Thank you," and began eating quietly. Veronica smiled proudly, as if she'd just taught a lesson. I watched the scene unfold, every fiber of my being screaming to stop it. But I waited until Veronica turned her back. I placed my hand gently on Emma's shoulder and whispered, "It's okay, sweetheart. You don't have to do that anymore." She looked up, her eyes wide in confusion. Veronica turned, hearing my voice. "What did you say?" she asked sharply. I met her gaze, my tone suddenly cold. "I said my daughter doesn't have to thank anyone for eating in her own home." The air shifted instantly. Her expression faltered for the first time, that confident mask cracking slightly. "Alexander," she said, trying to laugh it off, "you're misunderstanding." "No," I cut her off, standing now, my voice steady but filled with quiet rage. "For once, Veronica, I see everything clearly." She froze, realizing something had changed. What she didn't know was that I had proof, and soon everyone else would too. Veronica's face went pale, her perfectly practiced smile beginning to tremble as she realized I wasn't the same man she had manipulated for years. I stood still, my eyes locked on hers, letting the silence stretch long enough for her to feel its weight. "Alexander, you're overreacting," she finally said, her voice dripping with false innocence. "I was just trying to teach the girl some manners. You know how spoiled she's become." I took a slow step toward her, my expression calm, but my voice cutting through the air like a blade. "I saw everything, Veronica. The way you've been treating her, the things you've been saying, and not just once." She blinked rapidly, panic flickering behind her eyes. "What are you talking about?" She tried to ask, but her tone was shaking now. I reached for my tablet on the table and pressed play. The sound of her own voice filled the room, her cruel words to Emma, the insults, and finally, the recording of her phone call talking about taking control of my accounts. Her face drained of color completely as her own voice echoed back at her. "Once Emma goes to boarding school, I'll have full control of the accounts." For a moment, she looked like she couldn't breathe. Emma sat frozen, her fork slipping from her hand. The mask Veronica had worn for years shattered in an instant. "That's not what it sounds like," she stammered, her eyes darting from me to Emma and back. "You twisted this. I was just—" "Enough," I said sharply, my voice rising for the first time. "You humiliated my daughter. You used my trust, and you planned to steal from me." My tone softened only when I turned to Emma. "Go upstairs, sweetheart." She hesitated, then quietly left, glancing back at me with a mixture of fear and hope. Once she was gone, I faced Veronica fully. "You came into my life when I was broken," I said. "You made me believe you cared. But everything you did was calculated." Veronica's expression hardened, realizing the act wouldn't save her now. "You think you can just throw me out?" she sneered, her voice suddenly venomous. "After everything I've done for you?" I took a deep breath, stepped closer, and said quietly, "Yes. Starting today, everything you built on lies ends right here." For a long moment, the only sound in the room was the faint ticking of the clock on the wall. Veronica's face twisted between rage and disbelief, her polished composure crumbling. "You can't just kick me out, Alexander," she hissed. "You think you can humiliate me in front of everyone? I've been your wife, your support, the one who stood by you when no one else did." Her voice cracked at the end, but there was no sincerity left in it. I looked at her with a calm I didn't even recognize in myself. "You stood by me," I said slowly, "because you saw an opportunity. You knew I was grieving, and you saw a door into my life, into my wealth. You didn't marry me, you invested in me." Her lips tightened, but she didn't deny it. Instead, she straightened, that old arrogance flickering back for one last time. "Fine," she said bitterly. "You want me gone? I'll leave. But don't forget who helped you rebuild your reputation. I made this house run. I handled your business dinners. I kept your name clean while you hid in your grief." I nodded, unshaken, and in return, you tried to destroy my daughter's spirit. For the first time, her eyes faltered. That hit her, even if just for a second. "Emma is a spoiled child," she muttered weakly. "She needed discipline. She needed love," I said firmly. "Something you clearly never understood." I turned toward the door, gesturing for the security staff who had been waiting just outside. They entered quietly, professional and expressionless. "Please escort Mrs. Grant to her room. She'll pack her things and leave by this evening," I instructed. Veronica's voice rose instantly, desperate now. "You can't do this. You'll regret it. I'll take half of everything you own." I faced her one last time, my voice cold as steel. "You signed a prenuptial agreement, Veronica. You get nothing that doesn't belong to you, and you certainly don't get to hurt my daughter again." Her scream echoed through the hall as the guards gently led her away, her words turning into distant noise. When the door finally shut behind her, I exhaled for what felt like the first time in years. The house fell silent. But this time, it wasn't the silence of fear, it was the silence of peace returning, piece by piece. When the door closed behind Veronica, I stood still for a long while, letting the reality settle in. The air in the mansion felt different, lighter somehow, as if the walls themselves had been holding their breath all this time. My hands were still trembling, not from fear, but from the rush of everything that had just unfolded. I had faced countless boardroom battles, ruthless takeovers, and public scrutiny, but nothing compared to confronting the monster I had unknowingly let into my own home. I made my way upstairs to find Emma, and I stopped for a second outside her door. I could hear faint sniffles from inside. I knocked softly. "Sweetheart, it's me." There was a pause. Then her small voice said, "Come in." When I entered, she was sitting on her bed, clutching her teddy bear, her eyes red and puffy from crying. She looked up at me nervously, as if afraid of what might happen next. I sat beside her and gently brushed a strand of hair from her face. "It's over," I said quietly. "You'll never have to deal with her again." For a moment, she just stared at me, as if trying to believe the words. Then suddenly she threw her arms around me and began to sob. I held her tightly, feeling every tear soak into my shirt. "I thought you didn't see," she whispered between sobs. "I thought you didn't care anymore." My throat tightened painfully. "I'm so sorry, Emma," I said, my voice breaking. "I should have seen it sooner. I should have protected you." She pulled back slightly and looked at me, her small hands holding my face. "It's okay, Daddy, you did now." That one sentence shattered me completely. The courage in her voice, the forgiveness in her eyes-sit was more strength than most adults ever showed. I realized then that this house, this wealth, all the power I had built meant nothing without her happiness. I promised her that day that things would change, that she would never feel invisible again. I told her we would start over, together, and for the first time in years, when I looked into her eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen in so long, Hope. Over the next few days, the mansion felt like a completely different place. The tension that once lurked in every corner was gone, replaced by laughter, music, and light. Emma's smile slowly began to return, and I made it my mission to be home more often to have breakfast with her, to ask about her day, to make her feel like this house was truly hers again. The staff, who had once moved around nervously under Veronica's rule, now greeted us with genuine warmth. It was like the house itself was healing alongside us. But deep down, I knew I couldn't just erase what had happened. The damage Veronica caused wasn't only emotional, it had left scars on how my daughter viewed herself, how she trusted others. I wanted her to see that not all love came with conditions. Not all kindness had a hidden price. So one evening, I took her to the park where her mother used to take her when she was little. The sun was setting, painting the sky with soft orange and gold. We sat on the same bench her mother and I once shared, watching children run and play. "Do you remember coming here?" I asked gently. She nodded, a small smile tugging at her lips. "Mom used to buy me ice cream even when it was too cold," she said. I chuckled softly. She always said life's too short to wait for the right weather. Emma giggled, and for a brief moment, it felt like we were both seeing her again through those memories. I turned to her and said, "You know, your mom would be so proud of you. You've been through so much, and yet you're still kind, still strong. That's something even adults can't always manage." Her eyes shimmered in the fading light, and she leaned her head on my shoulder. "I just want us to be happy again," she whispered. "We will be," I promised. "Because happiness isn't about how big our house is or how much money we have. It's about being together, without fear." As we sat there in the quiet glow of the evening, I realized that the storm had finally passed, and in its place, something beautiful was beginning to grow again. Peace. But peace never comes without consequences. And I soon discovered that Veronica wasn't done trying to ruin what was left of our lives. A week after she left, I received a call from my lawyer. "Alexander, you might want to sit down for this," he said. My stomach tightened immediately. "What is it?" I asked. He sighed. "Veronica has filed a defamation suit against you. She's claiming emotional abuse and that you fabricated evidence to damage her reputation." For a few seconds, I didn't even speak. It was unbelievable, but not surprising. That was who she was, a woman who thrived on control and manipulation, who couldn't stand the thought of losing. I thanked my lawyer and told him to prepare everything. Fortunately, I had more than enough proof of her actions: the recordings, the witness statements from the staff, and the financial transfers that traced her attempts to move money into secret accounts. She had built her entire life on deceit, and now that very deceit was about to destroy her. When the day of the hearing arrived, I stood in court not as a billionaire protecting his assets, but as a father protecting his child. Veronica entered the courtroom dressed in black, her face pale yet defiant. She tried to play the victim, crying about how I had turned against her after years of loyalty. But when the judge asked for evidence, my lawyer calmly presented everything: the footage, the audio recordings, the financial documents. Each piece tore down her lies like dominoes falling one after another. Her expression shifted from confidence to shock to silent rage. By the time the hearing ended, the judge dismissed her case entirely and ordered her to return a portion of the funds she had secretly moved. She stormed out without looking back, her entire act collapsing in public view. Reporters swarmed the steps outside, but I said nothing. I didn't need revenge. I had truth, and truth was enough. When I came home that night, Emma ran to me the moment I walked through the door. "Is it really over this time?" she asked, her voice trembling. I smiled, pulling her close. "Yes, sweetheart," I whispered. "This time it's really over." And for the first time in years, I believed it. In the months that followed, life began to rebuild itself piece by piece, not through wealth or luxury, but through quiet moments that reminded me what truly mattered. Emma started smiling again, real smiles, the kind that reached her eyes. The house that once echoed with tension now filled with laughter, music, and the smell of her favorite chocolate pancakes every Sunday morning. I stopped measuring my success in profits and began measuring it in the time I spent with her. We took trips to places her mother had always wanted to visit: small towns, quiet beaches, little bookstores hidden in corners of cities. Each memory became a patch in the quilt of healing we were slowly stitching together. Sometimes, late at night, I would look out the window of my study, remembering how blind I had been, how grief had turned me into a man too busy to notice the pain of the one person who needed me most. I had all the money in the world, but had almost lost the only treasure that truly mattered: my daughter's trust. I made her a promise that I would never let anything or anyone come between us again. One evening, as we sat in the garden watching the sunset, Emma turned to me and said, "Daddy, I think Mom would be happy now." Her words hit me harder than I expected. I smiled through the lump in my throat and nodded. I think she would too. For the first time in years, the guilt I carried felt lighter, replaced by a quiet sense of peace. The world outside still saw me as a billionaire, a man of influence, of power, but inside, I had become something far more valuable. A father who had learned that love and protection mean more than any empire ever could. As the last light of the sun faded, I looked at Emma and thought about how far we had come from betrayal and heartbreak to healing and hope. Life had tested us in the cruelest way, but in the end, it gave us something stronger than revenge. It gave us redemption. And as I held her hand, I knew that no matter what storms might come, we'd face them together, as a family reborn from the ashes of pain.